You are listening to Christian Audio's production of 8 Women of Faith by Michael A.G. Haykin. This book is read by Jim Denison. This audio recording was produced in 2016 by Christian Audio, which owns the copyright. No portion of this recording may be reproduced for any reason without prior written consent from Christian Audio. This edition published by Christian Audio under an agreement with Good News Publishers, Crossway Books and Bibles. Based on 8 Women of Faith, copyright 2016, Michael A.G. Haykin, all rights reserved. Please visit christianaudio.com, facebook.com/Christian Audio, or twitter.com/Christian Audio to offer your impressions of this work and to explore additional titles. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them. Genesis chapter 1 verse 27, King James Version. Forward. Genesis chapter 2 tells us that God created a garden with every tree that is pleasant to the sight and good for food. Verse 9. God told Adam to eat freely of every tree, except one. But rather than focusing on the abundance God had offered freely, Adam and Eve turned their focus on the single thing that was off limits. And the rest is human history. Both within the church and outside it, we too have treated in a similar fashion the biblical admonition against women preaching. We focus on the single thing that is off limits and thereby fail to see the abundant opportunities and roles God has clearly offered, some of which are compellingly portrayed in the stories presented in this book. Likewise, the biblical admonition has led too often to extra-biblical limitations on women, as well as unbiblical oppression, also reflected in the societal restraints these 8 women experienced during their lives. This kind of failure toward women, unjustly imposed limitations on their personhood and soul equality, has sometimes led to a secondary failure. The failure to see and tell women's stories clearly, truthfully, and well. Thus there exists an abundance of works on the lives of women in the church that present readers with unrealistic saints, not flesh and blood women. Such accounts make good fairy tales, but not just or suitable examples of the true life of faith. On the other hand, much of today's retrospectives on women in history tend to focus, understandably and sometimes rightly, on limitations placed on women. Women have been, and still are, denied much, both in the church and in the culture at large. This book's snapshots of a mere 8 women from a mere 2 centuries offer an astonishing array of roles and achievements by women in a time when women were not so much second-class citizens as not citizens at all. Yet despite, and perhaps because of, such obstacles, what women have contributed and accomplished is rich and varied. Here in these pages, we meet queen, wife, theologian, hymnist, novelist, missionary, daughter, and friend. Even more importantly, we meet women of faith whose lives manifested the grace and glory of God through their faithful obedience to the roles to which they were called, whether in singleness or marriage, in sickness or in health, in riches or in poverty, and ultimately in death. The facets of womanhood represented in 8 Women of Faith shine brilliantly. This abundance is particularly striking within the early modern era represented by the lives detailed here. The period hinges on a significant turning point in both human history and church history, the Protestant Reformation. The Reformation's emphasis on faith alone and Scripture alone gave birth to the modern individual, and thus the evangelical tradition. And it is the lives of women that most clearly reflect the dramatic historical shifts that took place as a result. It's women of faith, particularly evangelical faith, with its emphasis on individual salvation, who mirror most clearly this great shift in human history and culture that elevated human agency and equality. These developments drew me to my own study of an evangelical woman of this era, Hannah More, the British poet, abolitionist, and reformer of the late 18th and early 19th centuries.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?